See, John was a man who saw some incredible things, who witnessed some incredible things. He heard incredible words. He saw these amazing miracles take place in front of him, and at some point he decided, I have to write this down. What I've been a part of, what I've been privy to has been so special. In fact, it's so special it's redefined my entire life that I have to put pen to paper. And as he put pen to paper, he wrote the book that we know as John about Jesus' life. He bases this book around 7 what he calls signs, where we can look at them and say those are miracles, but John would say, no. When I first saw them, I thought they were miracles. But as I got older, as I looked back on everything that took place, what I saw was more than a miracle, it was a sign. It was a sign because it pointed to something. And that something was who Jesus is. And today we've sort of been building up through the series to where we get to today because it's Easter Sunday. So we celebrate the ultimate sign, the ultimate miracle, the resurrection of Jesus. And as part of that, I want to encourage us to ask ourselves this question: who is Jesus? Now again, this is a question that many people in this room have spent a lot of time pondering, a lot of time thinking about, a lot of time potentially researching, and maybe you're here today and it's a question you haven't thought too much about, or maybe you've always meant to think about this a little bit more, but life just gets a little bit busy, your days get away on you, and you never quite get to it. But I want to suggest that this is a very, very important question that we all ask. Some people might say this is the most important question you could ever look into. I don't know your story, I don't know what's going on in your world, so I don't want to put that on you, but I'd suggest that it is a very important question to ask. And I think what we'll see today as we look at what John writes, I think we'll come to understand why, as he was living this out, he saw these miracles take place, and I think from what we read, we'll understand why he would have called them miracles initially, but later he would have said, no, these are more than miracles, these are signs. Because even though John saw all these miracles, even though he was present when they took place, when Jesus died, even John was fearful, even John was afraid, even John thought he'd been duped, even John thought, hang on a minute, have I wasted the last 3 years of my life following this man called Jesus? And when we finished last week with the sixth of these signs, where Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, an incredible miracle. And this happened in a place called Bethany. And from Bethany, Jesus and his disciples, they made their way to Jerusalem. And as they made their way to Jerusalem, because this incredible miracle had taken place, that the people around Jesus, the intensity of what was going, had been elevated till it was now at fever pitch. His followers, the people that were his fans, were like, come on, Jesus. In fact, as he went into Jerusalem, there were hundreds. A lot of scholars would say, actually, no, there were more than hundreds. There were thousands of people on the side of the streets chanting and clapping and calling out as Jesus went past. But in that crowd too, there were also more spies, the Pharisees, those who felt threatened by what Jesus was doing and said, hey, hang on a minute. What he's doing is escalating to such a level that if we don't finish him, if we don't kill him, if we don't quiet him, if we don't stop him, man, it's going to put us at odds with the Romans, and the Romans are going to shut down all of what we do, and we're just going to have nothing left. And so there was this huge thing going on. Jesus was coming. It started off sort of like we believe that this guy's our Messiah, but it turned political because of what people were saying. And as Jesus came into Jerusalem, he, for the final week of his life, a few different things happened, but a big event is what's often known as the Last Supper. And at the Last Supper, Jesus really made it very clear that he was here to bring about a new covenant, a new promise about how people could build relationship and stay connected to God. And Jesus had to bring a new covenant because there was an old covenant in place, and the old covenant was very, very complicated, and Jesus' new covenant was simple. The old covenant was very complicated, and you see this in the Old Testament, and the reason it was so complicated was because this was a covenant that God made with a certain group of people at a certain time in history that served those people at that time, so it was complicated. But when Jesus came, he was bringing a new covenant. And his covenant wasn't tied to a specific group at a specific time, but actually was for all people, for all the rest of time, in all locations. So it had to be very, very simple so it could go. And as Jesus created this new covenant between God and people, he instituted a new commandment. And his new commandment, which should define the kingdom that he was here to establish, was that we're called to love one another. And he doesn't say, hey, your responsibility is to love people the way that you want to be loved. Your responsibility isn't to treat others the way that they treat you. He says, no. I'll give you a new covenant. I want you to love one another the way that I have loved you, which is a selfless love, which is a sacrificial love. And he says, hey, this is what I want you to be known for. This is your new commandment. Go and love one another. And then a few days later, Jesus would give us the ultimate demonstration of love. And this ultimate demonstration wasn't him getting down on one knee and proposing to someone whom he wanted to marry. It wasn't him getting a pen and writing the most romantic poem that has ever been written, or the greatest screenplay that would reduce people to tears when they watched it. Now, his demonstration of love was him giving his life on the cross. And that's what John records for us. He says, so the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, Jesus went out to the place of the skull. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. I love the detail that John brings to this. He's not vague in how he tells the story. He's very, very clear. He's saying, hey, I was there, I saw this, I was an eyewitness. I can give you the details. He said Jesus bowed his head and gave up his spirit. I think John records that because he's saying, hang on, you can't take the life of the Son of God. You can't kill the Son of Man. Our Messiah, our Savior, you can't kill him. No. He has to give up his life. And then what we see John do next is he pivots. He's writing his account. He gets to this point, and I think he's thinking at this point, okay, everything that I've written so far is somewhat believable. Okay, some of the miracles might be hard for people to get their heads around, but I think a lot of people could understand, yes, that this self-proclaimed Messiah, this self-proclaimed man who comes from God, has made some public appearances, has done some incredible things, but he was also, like all those that had gone before him, because there are a lot of people that made the claim of being the Son of God, who made the claim to the Jewish people of being their Messiah. But like all the ones that had come before him, he too had been arrested. He too had been killed. And for all the others, that's where their story stopped. And so John just pivots. And I think he writes something for his future readers, for those that this letter was going to go out to. I think he wrote these next words for you. He wrote them for me. And he says, the man who saw it, he's talking about himself in the third person. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. So I want you to know that what I'm saying I saw. What I'm saying is me speaking about what took place in front of my eyes. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that, and he tells us why, so that we may also believe. We see throughout the book of John, John keeps coming to this idea that he wants us to believe. And he says it's easy for me to believe because I saw it, because I heard it, because I experienced, because I was there. But you don't have that same opportunity to see what I saw, to hear what I heard, to touch what I touched. And so I want to write it, and I want you to know that I'm writing this, and it's the truth, and I testify to it because I'm an eyewitness, and it totally reframed my life, and it can totally reframe your life too. But you've got to believe it. I'm not writing this so you'll know about it. I'm not writing this so it can be a story that you share with a few people. No, I'm writing this so that you'll believe it like I believe it. He goes on, he says, later, Joseph of Arimathea. And again, just look at the detail here. He's saying exactly who's involved in this. He's kind of really putting it out there, saying, hey, if you don't believe what I'm writing, go and find Joseph. You can talk to him. Later, Joseph asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. With Pilate's permission, he came and he took the body away. So the reason Joe had to go and ask Pilate for the body of Jesus was, in the Roman culture, if people got crucified, it's because they were criminals, right? And the reason they crucified them, well, was one, to punish them, but it was also to make a public statement. It was also a way using fear and control in order to keep people under their thumb. Because they're like, hang on, if this person's like pushing back against us, if this person is speaking out against us, if this person is doing something wrong and we publicly execute them, what's the next person who wants to speak out about them going to think? Oh, I don't want that fate. That cross looks pretty terrible. I'm just going to fall in line. So while the cross was there as a punishment, it was also used to keep people in line. So they'd like to leave the bodies up on the cross for as long as possible, because that would then be a reminder in the coming days, maybe even weeks, as people went past, as to what your fate would be if you crossed the Romans. But Pilate gave him the permission. And so here again, the detail, he was accompanied by Nicodemus. We don't get told too much about Nicodemus here, but this is the third time Nicodemus appears in John's account. So if you want to know more about Nicodemus, you can find it out. Again, he's someone you can go and ask about these events. The man who had earlier visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes and about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. Joe and Nicodemus, these were followers of Jesus. They asked Pilate to take his body to bury it. And when they got his body off the cross, they embalmed it and they wrapped it. Why would they embalm it? Why would they wrap the body of Jesus? The reason they embalmed it, the reason they wrapped it was because Jesus was dead. And when someone dies, they stay dead. And so even though Joe and Nicodemus were followers of Jesus, when they saw him die, they thought, he can't really be the Son of God. He can't really be who he claimed to be. He can't be our Messiah. He can't be our Savior because he is dead. I don't know if they were there when he raised Lazarus from the dead. I'm certain if they weren't there, they would have heard stories about it. So they know that Jesus had the ability to raise people from the dead, but if the miracle worker's dead, then who's going to work the miracle to bring him back to life? And they had enough respect for him to embalm him, to wrap him. Maybe they thought, oh man, we don't quite know. He's not who we thought he was, but there's still something special about him. And so they wrapped him up. And they embalmed him because that's what you do to dead people. They thought that Jesus was dead. Just as you'd think he was dead if you saw him dead on the cross. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in that garden, a new tomb in which no one had been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. It was convenient. It was easy. It was quick. They knew they didn't want to get caught working on a Sabbath, so they wanted to do the job quickly. One of the reasons Jesus got so much heat on him was because he was performing those miracles, those signs on the Sabbath, right? So these guys said, oh, we saw what happened to him. We don't want to get caught doing that. There's a tomb nearby. Let's wrap him. Let's put him in the tomb, because that's what we do with dead people. And then John doesn't give us a huge account of what takes place after this. So this is Friday night. We're not told what happened to John that Friday night. We don't know exactly where Nicodemus went. We don't know where Joseph went. We don't know where Mary, one of Jesus' closest followers, went on Friday night. We don't know what they did on the Saturday. But you don't need a huge amount of imagination to understand how these people would have been feeling. They would have been feeling duped. They would have been feeling conned. They would have been feeling angry, frustrated, upset, because the person that they thought was the Messiah, was the Son of God, was now dead. The person that they'd walked away from their fishing business to follow, or their tax booth to follow, the person that had walked away from their families to go after, was now dead. Would they have to go home with their tail between their legs and humbly apologize for walking away from their family? The one that they'd followed, so sure of who he was now dead, and they were uncertain as to what that was going to mean for them. They felt foolish. Probably felt dumb. We've all been there at some point in our life, right? And then on the Sunday morning, Mary, one of Jesus' followers who was there for the death, who saw the crucifixion, went back to the tomb where Jesus was buried. I wonder why she went to the tomb. The most logical reason I can think of as to why Mary went back to the tomb was because she knew that it was two men that wrapped Jesus and put him in the tomb. I said, hang on a minute, if we want the job done right, we've got to do it ourselves. And went back as a woman to fix the work of the men. And she went back to the tomb, and she got to the tomb, and she realized the tomb was empty. And so she runs back, and she knocks on the door of the place where the disciples were staying. And I wonder if in this place at first the disciples freaked out and got scared and thought, wow, no, the Romans are here to get us too. But then they would have realized, hang on a minute, if the Romans had come to get us, they wouldn't bother knocking. They'll just walk straight through the door and take us. So they go and they open the door, they answer the door, and Mary's there. And this is what Mary said. She says, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. See, when Mary saw that the tomb was empty, her assumption was that someone had stolen the body, because dead people stay dead. She got to the tomb, the body's not there. She thought, grave robbers have come. Someone's taken the body of Jesus, and we don't know where they have taken him. We don't even know who they are. What have they done with him? That was her reaction. You see, when it came to the empty tomb, I have to say this here, Easter, nobody was expecting nobody. Everybody was expecting the body to stay in the tomb. Nobody was expecting there to be nobody. And so Mary goes and she gets the guys. And John records for us here. So Peter and the other disciple, again talking about himself, started for the tomb. Both were running. This is how we know that John's just like us, especially us males, because of what he says next. But the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. So just a little detail that I have to get in. Me and Peter had a race and I was faster. He might have been a whole lot of other things, but I was a faster runner. And he gets that in there for us. Just like guys would do that, right? Yeah, I'm going to get that in just because I can, right? Come on, guys, where's my support here? You know you'd do it too. But then, what John does next is just as powerful, just as meaningful. He says he bent over and looked at the strips of linen lying there, but he did not go in. He didn't go in. He saw there was a tomb. He saw the strips of linen were there. Got there, saw, but he didn't go in. Why didn't he go in? Obvious answer, I think. Sometimes you read too much into these things, but I think if you just read this at face value, the obvious answer is he was scared. There's a tomb. They're not the most nicest places. You know that there's bodies that's been taken out from there. You don't know who else might still be in there. He was scared. I love how John writes himself into the story, not as a hero, but as a coward. Because that's what he was. That's what's true. He was an eyewitness who wants to report what took place. So he says he got there, he saw this, and he was too scared to enter. But then Simon Peter came along behind him. And unlike John, Simon Peter doesn't stop, he just runs in. See, if you've read the accounts of Jesus' life, you get to learn a few things about Simon Peter. He's someone who talks without thinking. He acts without thinking. The fact that it was scary didn't appear to him. He's action man. He just goes straight in. When Peter was in there, he saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. He was seeing this. His assumption would have been at this point that the grave had been robbed. But as he was there, he probably would have seen, hang on a minute, the assumption I've made is that the grave's been robbed. That's what Mary told me. That's what it would seem. But if you just think about it for a moment, if someone's going to rob the grave, take the body, that person's not going to unwrap the body, is they? Are they? They're not going to unwrap. It'd be so much easier to take the body out if it was still wrapped. It'd be a lot cleaner and nicer to take the body out if it was still wrapped. As Peter's in there and he sees the situation and starts to analyze it with a little bit more detail, he probably starts to come to him, hang on a minute. There's something more going on here. Something that I don't quite know how to explain just yet. And then John records for us, finally, after he picked up some courage, the other disciple, and just reminds us, hey, I might have been scared, but I was fast. You know, the one who reached the tomb first, also went inside. And then he does what he's been doing throughout this entire book that he wrote. He says, he went inside and he saw the linen. He saw there was no body. He saw and he believed. Because seeing is believing. What you see, you believe. What you experience, you believe. It's easy to believe when you see. And John went in and he saw the tomb and he believed. I wonder if he was starting to recall some of those instances of things Jesus had said, like when he said, hey, this temple will be torn down and in 3 days it will be rebuilt. Hang on a minute, he's not talking about the temple, he was talking about himself. And a lot of the other things that Jesus said started to fall into place in his mind, and then all of a sudden he believed that Jesus truly was the Son of God. You see, when Jesus died, when Jesus was on the cross, John, even though he'd seen, even though he'd experienced, even though he'd been there when Jesus fed the 5,000, when he'd healed that blind man, when he'd turned water into wine and he'd seen these miracles take place, he saw all of this, but then when he died, his belief plummeted. But when he saw that empty tomb, it came back. So this is why I'm convinced that John saw these signs as miracles. It was only later, as he got older, as he reflected back on everything that happened, he said, no. These are more than miracles. These are signs. And then Jesus started appearing to different groups and different people. And we're not going to go through all of them, but one I want to dive into is an account of a man called Thomas. And John records this for us. He says, now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told Thomas, we have seen the Lord. And Thomas responded the way that you'd respond, the way that I'd respond, the way that a normal person would respond. I just think, man, it's so unfair that he gets labeled Doubting Thomas because he reacts just like we'd react. And he says, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. He says what we know, right? Unless I see it, I can't believe it. Unless I touch it, how do I know that it's true? This is crazy. We saw him dead. He's not alive. If I see it, I'll believe it. But if I don't see it, sorry team, I can't just take your word for it. A week later, Jesus' disciples were in their house again and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." I think he just simply said this because everyone in the house was scared. Imagine you're in a room and everything's locked, and all of a sudden someone you didn't expect to be there was there. How do they get there? You freak out a little bit. Then Jesus turns his attention to Thomas. And it's just remarkable how accurate what he says to him is. He says, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side." See, even though Jesus wasn't there when Thomas said these things, Jesus knew what Thomas was thinking. He knew what Thomas had said. He says, "See, touch, experience." Then he says, "Stop doubting and believe." Stop doubting and believe. I love how Thomas said, "Hey, unless I see, I cannot believe." And Jesus creates a moment that enables him to see in order for him to believe. And so Jesus, knowing that this is how we think, says, "Because you have seen me, you have believed." And then Jesus says something that's not relevant to all the people in the room. That doesn't mean anything to the people in the room. In fact, to the people in the room, what he says next is pointless. Because everyone in the room has seen, has touched, has experienced, has felt. But what Jesus says next clearly isn't for their benefit. But what Jesus says next is for your benefit, for my benefit, for the benefit of all who were to come. Because Jesus knew. John didn't, but Jesus did. That this account was going to go out, and it was going to go far, and it was going to go wide, and it was going to get passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation to generation. And he knew that 2,000 years later, people on the other side of the world are going to see this account, and they're going to read this account, and they're going to study this account. And so while Jesus could say to Thomas, "Because you have seen me, you have believed," he adds these words. And John records them. He says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Because he knew there were going to be generations of people that would not see, that would not experience, that would not touch, that would not feel, that would come to believe. They don't need to see to believe, but they can trust the eyewitness accounts of those who were there. And Jesus knows that's hard, that's tough. Because when you've seen something, it's unbelievable. But when you hear about it, it's not so much. He asks us to do what other people have been asked to do on some of those other signs. To believe without seeing. To walk home to a son who's been healed, even though you don't know that your son's actually been healed while you walk. And John goes on and says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these have been written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. John would say, look. It wasn't Jesus' death, but it was his resurrection that redefined my life. It was his resurrection that helped me realize that he was who he says he is. And as I've come to know him, as I look back on my life, all I can say is, man, when I believe in him, I have been able to live life and life to the full. John would later write other letters. One of them is called 1 John, and in that he tries to describe who God is. And when he describes who God is, he says God is, and it's like, how do I fill in the blank here? He says, I've met with him, I've walked with him, I've talked with him. What do I say? And he just says, God is love. That's who he is. loves you. He sacrificed for you. I'll invite the rest of the music team up because we want to take a moment here to go back to that question, who is Jesus? And the team's going to perform a song for us. And I'm going to encourage you to sit here. And if you want to close your eyes, close your eyes. If you want to pray in your head, because you pray out loud, it might be a little weird for the people around you. Talk to God. But what I love about this song is it's got this line in it that says, come just as you are. And just as Jesus met Thomas in his doubt, he'll meet you where you are. And the cool thing about God is his love for you is so rich, his love for you is so deep that he knows everything about you. Just like he knew what Thomas had said and what Thomas was thinking when he wasn't there, he knows everything you've thought. He knows everything that you've said. He knows every word that's come out of your mouth. He knows every laugh that you've ever laughed. He's seen every tear that you've ever cried. He's seen those people hurt you, and his heart's been broken by it. He's seen you hurt other people, and his heart's been broken by it. He's seen it all, yet he still chooses to love you. So no matter what your story, no matter where you are, that's what the song reminds us, is that we can come just as we are. Thanks, guys.
If you're lonely, longing for someone to hear you, if your burdens feel like more than you can bear, if you're searching for a place to just be honest, come just as you are. If you're tired of just hoping for an answer, if you're wishing you could let your God come down, if you feel like you can't hold it all together, come just as you are. There's no need for any hiding. In the Father's house you met with open arms, and He gives grace without condition. And as you are, with nothing else, just come. There is space for everyone who feels unworthy, a place for those who never felt at home, but you don't have to wonder if you're wanted. Come just as you are. There's a hope for you and me. His name is Jesus. He's the one who makes the broken whole again. And there's no need for you to pick up all the pieces. Come just as you are. There's no need for any hiding. In the Father's house you made with open arms, just thought of God as distant. Maybe you have never trusted Him at all. The safety here to wrestle with your questions. Come just as